Now to the UK and the lead up to the funeral for Queen Elizabeth II. Now, among the 7 engagements today, King Charles III and the Queen Consort were in Scotland, where thousands, if not millions of people lined the streets of Edinburgh to pay their respects to the late Queen. Politicians and other dignitaries from the House of Commons and House of Lords crammed into the British Parliament to extend their condolences to King Charles III and the Queen Consort. The King took time to pay tribute to his mother's service, something he vowed to continue.
She set an example of selfless duty, which, with God's help and your counsels, I am resolved faithfully to follow.
Following the speech, God Save the King broke out. A moment that seemed to strike an emotional chord for the new king. While Charles attended the service, his youngest son, Harry, released a heartfelt tribute for his granny. He said, in part, "Forever grateful for all our first meetings, from my earliest childhood memories of you to meeting you the first time as my commander-in-chief, to the first moment you met my darling wife and hugged your beloved great-grandchildren." Charles and Camilla then jetted off to Edinburgh, Scotland, where the Queen's coffin has spent the night at the Renaissance Palace of Holyroodhouse. The royals made sure to spend time with those who had been waiting for hours to pass their condolences.
Are you all from Edinburgh? From Nottingham, I don't believe.
I felt sorry for him. He hasn't even gone into the house yet to Holyrood, and he came round and shook hands.
I found it more emotional than I thought, because at the end of the day he's just a grieving son. But he was, he basically said to us that he had been dreading the moment coming and he was trying to keep everything going.
In a formal procession, the Queen's casket, draped by the royal standard flag and surrounded by her children and guards, was transported slowly down the narrow streets of Edinburgh where massive crowds were waiting. A respectful scene where some onlookers couldn't help but shed tears for the fallen Queen.
I've lived in Britain most of my life. It's very emotional. You've got to put yourself in our children's position. They don't even have time to grieve. They're in the public eye. I'm glad she died in Scotland and we had the chance to say goodbye.
The procession made it down the Royal Mile and entered St. Giles Cathedral for a service of thanksgiving before the period of lying at rest. The Duke of Hamilton placed the crown of Scotland on the coffin as King Charles and his siblings, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Prince Andrew, stood by their mother's coffin. The late Queen will lie in state until her casket is flown to London tomorrow, where a line has already formed to view her coffin. Now, there's a lot of moving parts ahead of next Monday's funeral. Canada's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom says our country will have an important role in Queen Elizabeth II's funeral. Ralph Goodale says members of the Canadian delegation have begun to arrive to handle the logistics surrounding the funeral, which Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Governor General Mary Simon are expected to attend. Now, Goodale says Canadian Armed Forces and the RCMP are also expected to pay roles.